on the right picture was main figure in alcohol prohibition. And when alcohol was legal after prohibition, a state told him that his office would be closed if he doesn't came up with some new enemy. And the new enemy, of course, was marijuana. 1937, under public pressure, there was Marijuana Tax Act. You see that this is not Cannabis Tax Act, this is Marijuana Tax Act. And creator of it was Harry Anslinger and U.S. Treasury Department's Federal Bureau of Narcotics, FBN. Before that, it was Federal Bureau of Alcohol. William Randolph Hearst, this guy on the left, he's something like Rupert Murdoch today, and DuPont Corporations, which creates first silicon materials. They thought that cannabis is a great enemy of silicon materials because it is cheaper and it is more stable. So they hired up William Randolph Hearst and his whole media in USA. They paid up to Henry Anslinger and they wanted to prohibit cannabis. So some authors think that legacy in that time in USA didn't know that marijuana and cannabis are the same thing, but when you see money transactions between these people, you know that they already know that cannabis and marijuana are the same thing, but they don't want to mention it because it is easier this way to prohibit it. 1941, cannabis was removed for pharmacotherapy and the US list of drugs. Drugs doesn't mean psychedelic drugs, but the drugs is cure. And before that time, 1937, 1941, there were 4 years that marijuana was illegal, cannabis was legal. Lawyer W.C. Woodward disputes claims about crime caused with marijuana effect. He thinks that marijuana isn't dangerous, and he thinks that this is a huge cover-up and a huge conspiracy theory. Huge conspiracy. Senator John Dangel in Congress, when he wants to pursue anti-cannabis laws, he told this in US Congress. We know that it is a habit that is spreading, particularly among youngsters. We learned that from pages of the newspapers. The number of victims is increasing each year. And when they want to forbid cannabis, they speak in media that marijuana or cannabis is main reason for revolution in Mexico, and that if the people in the USA smoke weed, they would create revolution. I think that they were right in that in that argument, but they were misleading us. And New York Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia, he didn't. This is only a politician in USA, which country wasn't listening to Congress, this huge Congress race, and he didn't want to forbid cannabis before he makes study about. And conclusion of this study was there is no evidence that marijuana creates crimes, aggressive behavior, sexual delicts, persona alterations, or organism immunity. That these were main causes for forbidding it. And it is 1 or 2 rankings weaker than alcohol, cigarettes, or gambling. This is the final conclusion. Of course, in 1945, FDA and FBN dismissed study as harmful. And they will kick all scientists that were creating this study from universities. And advice for legislative was prohibition of marijuana in USA. That was a really tough time for all producers of cannabis, for industry of cannabis. And it was funny that in 1941 cannabis was forbidden in USA, and when there was a huge crisis in the Second World War, USA bring back this money support from the state for cannabis producers, and maybe 2 or 3 years in the Second World War, cannabis was legal. It was legal even it was illegal with laws. So it is a conclusion that laws in the USA doesn't matter when president said something else. Maybe 25 years passed and nobody talks about cannabis. There were huge jail sentences for anybody who would practice it. And in 1970 there was first study after the prohibition. R2DLC Corporation read about these conclusions from Senate and Congress maybe 25 or 30 years ago, and they read that cannabis creates revolutions, that cannabis creates aggressive people, and it destroys families. And when they read that, they think that if it is so harmful, it would be a great weapon for wars. So they was preparing for Vietnam War, and they think that if they could spread the THC through atmosphere with aeroplanes, that it would create madness on the Vietnam soldiers. But R2DLC creates that study for US military, but without wanted results. And the conclusion was that cannabis create no aggressions, right, or delicts. So US military dismissed the cannabis as a war weapon. In 1970, no matter what R2DLC concludes, CDA, PCA voted in Congress, and they voted this huge act, Comprehensive Drug Abuse Prevention and Control Act, about all psychedelic and other drugs. So we could see the results now. In 1970, there was also a created Controlled Substances Act, and we can tell that in 1970 was first year on drug wars. First class of drugs are drugs which destroy organism and psyche of consumer, and cannabis is in this class. So in the first class that were most harmful drugs, cocaine, heroin, and cannabis were 3 drugs in this first class. In fourth class, as we can see, and we can see the fourth class was pentazocine, and in the first year of consumption of pentazocine, hundreds of people died from side effects. So it is fourth class, not harmful, and the first class of harmful drugs is cannabis. Cannabis is, until that day and until today, without lethal case or physical addiction. But it's not a problem to American legislature. 1976, first END, or Compassionate Investigation New Drug Program. It was a program with patients on cannabis. So that was first year that they finally admitted that cannabis has good effects on battle with diseases. First patient was Robert Randall. 1978, New Mexico was first world state of medical cannabis. We could say that it's even today that New Mexico is most liberal and Texas is most unliberal country in USA. 1978 to 1986, 250 people cured with natural THC, only 3 side effects recorded, but of course without that. 1985, natural cannabis is first class, but synthetic THC is now second class. So if you put out natural THC, it is first class, it is most harmful, but when you create synthetic, it is second class. It is pretty obvious that they deliberately want to kick cannabis from usage without any conclusions or side effects. And then this person, this picture, Elaine Pearson, she used cannabis for relaxation from hard chemotherapy treatments, and she died without legal dose of cannabis. She was in a good health state, all mainstream media in USA, maybe that was the second part of 1890s, and she was in a great health state, but she was smoking cannabis. And the court forbid her to smoke cannabis, and she died in a lot of pain. And it was the first huge case that was in mainstream media. In 1988, a statement of Judge Francis L. Young, who used this case on his case. Natural cannabis is one of the safest therapeutically active substances known to man. Pharmaceutical lobby is strictly against cannabis. Even today, we can see it in practice. And in 1990, married couple Jenkins, who were suffering from HIV virus, goes 5 years in prison for 2 cannabis talks. And after huge media pressure, they were let on freedom. So even in Croatia today, we can see that when media creates pressure, there are good results. There are good results, and I am journalist, so I could tell that media pressure today in this whole world situation is maybe only vox populi that we have today. George Bush Sr. was last big opponent of medical cannabis, and after him even presidents talk about consuming of cannabis and smoking in high school. What?
But smoking but not cocaine.
Yeah. And today we can see even 3 or 4 states in USA that decriminalize or make cannabis legal. But there is some other problem in USA. Cannabis is legal in California and some other states, but federal laws didn't give them right to create cannabis legal. So you can smoke cannabis on the street, but if FBI catch you, you got jail sentences. No matter that state that state give the right to smoke it. So there are a lot of sorts of problems. Even FBI today is putting their agents in some huge corporations that are doing the products with cannabis, and there are a lot of cases in all parts of US with using cannabis or illegal using of cannabis. And here is the second part of the lecture, cannabis is cure, in which diseases it could be used. Natural hemp doesn't require herbicides or pesticides and creates humus, and we can skip this part. These are the biggest effects of cannabis, good effects of cannabis. Chemotherapy, I think that today fight against cancer is the biggest and the most well-known practice of using cannabis or Rick Simpson's oil. Chemotherapy is destroying tissue, 88% singular studies, so it is a great problem that all studies are created from pharmaceutical companies, something like GMO food. Sickness, you cure sickness with antiemetics, some very controversial